I wasn't supposed to be awake at 2 a.m. I had just drifted off an hour earlier after another long day of pretending everything was fine. The house was silent, our bed still carrying her warmth from earlier that evening. She'd kissed me on the forehead before leaving for her night shift, whispering the same words she always did. I love you. But tonight it felt off. I couldn't explain it then, just a chill behind those 3 words, a hesitation she tried to hide behind routine. Still, I kissed her back, smiled, told her to drive safe. And then I slept, or tried to, until the phone rang. It was the kind of ring that slices through dark, through dreams, through peace. I sat up instantly, heart thudding, mind racing. My first thought was something happened at the hospital, a patient emergency, maybe an accident. But then I saw her name glow on the screen. Sarah? My nurse wife. I answered on the first ring. Hello? My voice cracked, already on edge. But it wasn't the hospital chaos I heard on the other end. It wasn't alarms or rushing footsteps. It was her, crying, not sobbing, not panicking, crying in a way that felt broken, like she was unraveling while trying desperately to hold herself together long enough to speak. I froze, the sheets wrapped around me like chains. Sarah? What happened? Are you okay? There was a long pause. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, she whispered, I can't keep this from you anymore. It wasn't a sentence. It was a bullet. It hit something inside me that words normally can't reach. Because when someone says that, it's never something small. It's never, I lost my ID badge, or I broke a rule at work. No, it's always the kind of truth that changes everything. The kind that splits your life into 2 halves, before and after. I swallowed hard. Keep what from me? She didn't answer right away. I could hear her trying to breathe, trying to calm the storm inside her lungs. But each second of silence just fed mine. My mind was already running. Had she lost a patient? Had she made a mistake? Or was this about us? Her voice returned. Fragile. I should have told you sooner. But I was scared. And then it got worse. And then I didn't know how to stop. That's when I stopped breathing. Because I knew. I didn't have the details, but I knew. The moment someone starts talking like that, the details don't matter yet. What matters is the foundation beneath you. It starts to crumble. Everything you thought you were building, it begins to collapse with every breath they take. I asked her again, more quietly this time. What's going on, Sarah? Then she said it. Not a full story. Not the whole truth. Just one sentence. But it was enough to send a crack down the middle of who I thought I was. There's someone else. I closed my eyes, but that didn't stop the world from spinning. My mouth went dry. My hands clenched around the phone. My heart, once rushing, now felt like it was being wrung out, every beat heavier than the last. This wasn't just betrayal. This was her betrayal. My wife, the woman who held my face in her hands on our wedding night and promised me forever. The woman who tended to strangers with care and compassion, who carried pain home from work but still made time to ask about my day. The woman I trusted with every part of me, even the ones I never showed the world. And now this? She kept talking, but I barely heard her, because in that moment, something inside me shattered. Not in an explosive way, not loud, but quiet, final, like glass slipping off a counter and breaking in the softest way imaginable. Still sharp, still dangerous, but almost gentle in how it tore you open. And there, at 2 a.m., in the stillness of our shared life, I realized something that made my skin go cold. The woman I loved with everything I had no longer existed. If you've ever laid next to someone who made you feel completely alone, then maybe this story isn't just mine, it's ours. And if that's true, subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard by those who understand. She said it again, this time with more force, like she was trying to convince herself it was finally okay to let the truth escape. I can't keep this from you anymore. Her voice cracked mid-sentence, and in that fragile tone, I heard the months, maybe years, of pressure she had carried. I sat there in the dark, phone pressed to my ear, listening to her unravel while I tried to stay whole. But something inside me had already begun to fray. My thoughts started racing backward, Through every late shift, every quiet dinner, every time she said she was tired and went to bed early, every night she stayed late at the hospital because a patient needed her. Was that the truth, or was I the patient she abandoned for someone else's bedside? I wanted to ask. God, I wanted to ask. But I couldn't speak. My tongue felt paralyzed by the weight of everything crashing down around me. She went on, her voice shaking, words barely audible over the sound of her own guilt. It started. I don't even know when it started. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean for it to. I just felt seen. I felt noticed in a way I hadn't in a long time. And there it was, the first dagger. Because those words were more than a confession. They were an indictment of our marriage. They said, you didn't see me. You stopped noticing me. They said, this wasn't just about him. It was about what we lost. My heart screamed, wanted to defend itself. I wanted to say, but I did see you. I brought you coffee on your night shifts. I listened when you vented about patience. I waited up for you when you came home late. But none of that came out. Because part of me was already wondering, maybe she was right. Maybe I had gotten too comfortable. Maybe I had been so proud to have her. I forgot I needed to fight for her too. But still, nothing justified this. Nothing excused her turning to someone else instead of turning toward me. I finally found my voice, low and trembling. Who is it? A silence. Then, a doctor. Someone I work with. I already hated him. Not because I knew him, but because I knew he'd seen her the way I once did. And worse, she had let him. She had given him access to parts of her heart that were supposed to belong to me. My hand began to shake, not out of rage, out of devastation. I asked a question I didn't want the answer to. Did you love him? Her reply was like a whisper from a grave. I don't know. And that was the worst answer of all, because it meant yes, in a way that couldn't be undone. I stared into the darkness, the shadows of our bedroom dancing across the walls from the faint streetlight outside. This was the same room where we had made vows, the same room where we dreamed about kids, the same room where I used to reach for her in the middle of the night and feel safe. Now it felt cold, foreign, like it belonged to someone else's story. Why are you telling me now? I asked, my voice nearly gone. Another pause. Then she said something I'll never forget. Because I saw a man today, his wife died in the ICU, and the last thing she ever said to him was, I wish I had told you the truth. And just like that, I understood. It wasn't just guilt. It was fear. She was afraid that if life came crashing down, she'd leave this world carrying the weight of a lie she never let go of. She didn't confess because she wanted to save us. She confessed because she didn't want to die with secrets. And that somehow made it worse, because it meant this wasn't about me. It was about her peace, her soul, her relief. I was just a collateral, the recipient of her purge. I was the wall she threw her pain against. And suddenly, I wasn't a husband anymore. I was just the final chapter in a book she was done reading. And still, I listened, because when you love someone that deeply, even their truth, no matter how painful, feels like something you owe it to yourself to hear. Even if it destroys you, I don't care about algorithms. I care about the people listening to this who are bleeding silently like I did. If you've ever held back tears just to protect someone who didn't protect you, subscribe. You don't have to do this alone anymore. She said it softly, as if the words might fall apart if spoken too loudly. I'm still at the hospital. I could hear the sterile silence in the background, the quiet hum of machines, the occasional distant beat from monitors that marked life or death. It was surreal. She was standing in the same place where she had saved lives, and now she was tearing one apart. Mine. I imagined her leaning against a white wall, maybe in the corridor near the break room, her scrub slightly wrinkled, a coffee gone cold in her hand, mascara smudged not from a long shift, but from guilt. She continued, her voice trembling. I'm in the ICU. I had to step away. I couldn't keep pretending. That word echoed in my chest. Pretending. How long had she been doing that? Smiling at me across the dinner table, while her heart was somewhere else? Letting me hold her at night, while she dreamt of another man? The thought made me feel sick. like the ground beneath me wasn't real anymore. "He's not here tonight," she whispered. But I passed by his patient's room earlier. I wasn't supposed to stop, but I did. She paused, and I realized something. I don't want to live like this anymore. I didn't say anything. I couldn't, because part of me didn't know what she meant. Was this her way of ending the affair? Or was this the moment she was choosing him and ending us? I wanted clarity, but I was afraid of the answer. My silence must have felt like permission, because she went on. "The patient, he's a veteran." I held his hand while he struggled to breathe, and he told me about his wife, how he almost lost her once, but fought like hell to get her back. He looked me in the eye and said, if she had walked away, I would have walked with her. She inhaled shakily, and in that moment I realized I had stopped walking with you a long time ago. Her words weren't sharp. They weren't cruel. They were worse. They were honest. Honest in a way that left no room to argue. Honest in a way that made me feel like every moment of intimacy we had shared recently was just her going through the motions, kissing me with lips that spoke someone else's name in silence. I stood up from the bed, pacing slowly, trying to keep the walls from closing in. "So what are you saying, Sarah?" I asked, my voice low, raw. "Are you leaving me?" She didn't answer right away. The weight of her pause was unbearable. Then she said, "I don't know what I'm doing. I just know I don't deserve the way you still look at me." That line hit harder than anything else, because I did still look at her with love. Even in that moment, even as she confessed to betraying everything we had built, I still saw the woman I married, the woman who nursed me back to health when I was sick, the woman who sang off-key in the shower, the woman who once dreamed of a house filled with children and laughter. But maybe she didn't see herself that way anymore. Maybe, to her, that version of us had already died, somewhere between sterile white walls and late-night texts to a man in the next room. "I thought I was strong enough to bury it," she said, almost apologetically. "But every time you hugged me, every time you told me you loved me, it felt like a lie I didn't deserve." My heart twisted, not just from betrayal, but from the realization that she had been suffering too, not in the same way I was now, but in the quiet, daily way of carrying a secret she couldn't bear. She hadn't just broken me. She'd been breaking too, and that knowledge didn't bring comfort. It brought chaos, because it meant we were both bleeding, just in different ways. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. There was more to this story. More pain. More truth. More unraveling to come. She said his name softly, as though it might burn her tongue to say it louder. "Raphael." I recognized it instantly. Not from our life, not from dinners or friend circles, but from the screen of her phone, the name that had haunted me since that night. She forgot to lock it. Dr. Raphael. That was how his name showed up. Clean, professional, almost innocent. But nothing about it was innocent anymore. My grip on the phone tightened as I whispered, "How long?" She exhaled, not in relief, but like she'd been waiting for that question. "Almost a year." A year. A full year of walking beside me, smiling beside me, sleeping beside me, while her heart lived in someone else's hands. I felt like I was standing outside my own body, watching this conversation unfold from somewhere else, somewhere far away. Was it physical? I asked. I don't know why I needed to know. Maybe because I hoped it was just emotional. Maybe because I feared it wasn't. There was a pause. Then a faint and broken, yes. I sat down, not because I was tired, but because I couldn't stand anymore. My knees betrayed me, like my whole world had. "I never meant for it to happen like that," she said quickly. "It started as conversations during breaks, long shifts, helping each other decompress after hard cases. He understood things I couldn't explain to anyone else. And I guess I leaned on him too much. I wanted to scream, to shout, to throw something, anything, but I didn't, because somewhere beneath all that rage was a deeper, heavier ache. "Did you love him?" I asked again. This time, I wanted the truth, the raw, unfiltered answer. She hesitated. I thought I did. At some point, maybe. But then I started looking at him and realizing he was just an escape from the parts of our marriage I didn't want to face, from the guilt, from the distance. Her honesty sliced deeper than any lie could, because it wasn't just about him. It was about everything we hadn't said to each other, everything we let go unspoken for too long. And now the silence between us had grown teeth. Did he love you? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, almost bitterly, she said, he told me he did, but when I told him I wanted to tell you the truth, he pulled away, said he couldn't be part of this drama. I scoffed. So the man who loved her enough to take what was mine didn't love her enough to face the storm with her. And now, she stood in the wreckage, alone, but not nearly as alone as I felt. She had made a choice. Maybe not in one moment, maybe not with a plan, but slowly. She had drifted from me and toward him, one shared coffee at a time, one late-night venting session at a time, one text message at a time. And now, she stood there, stripped of the illusion, asking me to see her, not as a villain, not as a wife, but as a broken human being who had failed and was now confessing in hopes of something. Forgiveness? Closure? Redemption? I didn't know. And the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted either. Part of me still loved her, bitterly, stupidly. The kind of love that doesn't die even when it should. The other part of me wanted to vanish, to rewind time and unlive every moment that led to this. What do you want from me, Sarah? I asked quietly. Do you want me to forgive you? To fight for you? Or are you telling me all this because you've already made your choice? Her voice cracked, soft but final. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking you to see me, one last time, not as what I've done, but as who I was before I got lost. And that's when I realized maybe this wasn't a plea to save our marriage. Maybe it was a eulogy. She wasn't trying to rebuild. She was trying to bury it with honesty. But what she didn't understand was this. I didn't want honesty. I wanted us. And now us was gone. After the call ended, I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or throw my phone across the room. I just sat there in the dark, staring at the screen long after her name disappeared, like it might light up again and say it was all a mistake. But it didn't. The silence that followed was louder than any fight we'd ever had. It was a kind of silence that only comes after something sacred has died, something you thought was eternal. I looked around our bedroom, the picture frame of us laughing in the snow, the sweater she always wore draped over the chair, the book she never finished still resting on her nightstand. Everything was the same, but it all felt like a museum exhibit now, a collection of memories from a life that wasn't real anymore. I stood and walked to the mirror. I looked at myself, hoping to find some piece of the man she once loved. But all I saw was a stranger, hollow, tired, humiliated. The man in the reflection wasn't strong. He wasn't angry. He was just lost. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the realization that the woman I had loved, shared my life with, trusted with my soul, had been slowly becoming someone else right in front of me. And I never noticed. I had watched her come home late, watched her smile fade over time, watched her stare off during dinner or pretend to be too tired to talk. And I made excuses. I told myself she was stressed, that nursing was hard, that I just needed to be patient. But now, I realized I hadn't been patient. I had been blind. I didn't lose her last night. I lost her a long time ago, piece by piece. And that's what shattered me the most. It wasn't a sudden death. It was a quiet unraveling. And I let it happen. Maybe I was too trusting. Maybe I didn't ask enough questions. Maybe I believed that love was enough. But love, as I learned at 2 a.m. on a random Tuesday, isn't bulletproof. It bleeds. It breaks. It dies if no one fights for it. And she hadn't been fighting. She had surrendered, not just to him, to the version of herself that let go of what we had. And now, I was standing in the ruins, realizing the woman I kissed goodbye every morning had been a ghost for months. Who are you, Sarah? I whispered to no one, because the truth is, I didn't know anymore. I knew her laugh, her routines, her scent when she came home from work. But I didn't know what made her heart beat lately. I didn't know what she dreamed about when she lay beside me. I didn't know what she cried about when I wasn't looking. And that, more than anything, broke me, because I had loved her so completely, and yet I had lost her so quietly. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and scrolled back through old messages, not hers, but mine. Birthday texts. I miss you texts. Voice notes I sent when she was on night shifts, just so she'd wake up to my voice. I needed to know I had been real, that my love had meant something. But even as I listened, it felt like listening to someone else's story, someone who didn't know the ending, someone who still believed. And that man, he didn't exist anymore. The version of me that believed love could survive anything died the moment I realized I had no idea who she truly was anymore. And in that silence, I made a quiet vow to myself. No matter what came next, whether I forgave her or walked away, I would never let myself become invisible again. I would never let love blind me to the truth. Because now, I knew what it felt like to love a stranger. And I would never let that happen to me again. That if this sounds like your life, stop pretending you're fine. Stop hiding it like I did. Subscribe, not for me, but for every person who thought they were crazy, until the truth finally shattered them. You're safe here. We see you. It was the next evening when she came home. Same keys jingling at the door. Same footsteps crossing the hall. Same perfume trailing behind her. Soft, familiar, almost cruel in its normalcy. But nothing felt the same anymore. I was sitting on the couch, lights low, phone face down on the coffee table. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head all day, but when I saw her standing there in her scrubs, hair slightly frizzy from a long shift, I felt everything all over again, the confusion, the ache, the disappointment, and worst of all, the love that still hadn't died. She looked at me like I was a stranger, and maybe I was. Maybe we both were now. "Can we talk?" she asked, barely above a whisper. I nodded, not because I wanted to, but because some part of me needed closure, even if it came wrapped in more pain. She sat on the edge of the couch, not too close, like she was afraid even her nearness might burn me. "I never wanted to hurt you," she began. "I know that sounds hollow now, but it's true." I said nothing. She continued. "I think I was waiting for something to shake me awake, something to remind me of what we had. And I kept waiting, and then it was too late." She looked down at her hands like they might have answers her mouth couldn't give. "He was a distraction, a mistake. But you were my home." That word, home, cut deeper than any insult, because she had set fire to it. And now she sat here, among the ashes, try to name it like it still meant something. I looked at her, and for the first time, I wasn't wondering if she still loved me. I was wondering if I still loved myself enough to walk away. "Sarah," I said, slowly, "do you know what it's like to feel unwanted in your own marriage? To give your best, while someone else gives pieces of themselves to another?" She looked up, eyes wet, but she didn't interrupt. "I kept showing up," I said, "every single day. I made excuses for your distance. I defended you to my own heart. I told myself you were tired, overwhelmed, overworked, but I was the one carrying the weight alone." My voice cracked. I didn't plan to let it, but I couldn't stop it. I begged the universe to give me a sign. Just one. And then I got it, in the form of a name I'll never forget, Dr. Raphael. She broke into tears. But for once, I didn't rush to comfort her, because I realized her pain wasn't mine to hold anymore. I stayed in this marriage believing we were just going through a rough patch, believing that love like ours could survive anything. But I was wrong. I stood up, not to leave, but to reclaim something, maybe my pride, maybe my peace. This isn't about revenge. It's not about punishing you. It's about finally choosing my own heart over yours. She whispered my name like it was a prayer, but I was done praying for a miracle that wouldn't come. "I don't hate you," I said, softer now, "but I can't keep loving someone who doesn't choose me. I deserve to be someone's only, not someone's option." I walked toward the bedroom to pack a few things, not because I wanted to slam the door behind me, but because I needed to breathe, to exist without the shadow of betrayal, choking every corner of my mind. That night, as I lay in a friend's guest room staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize, I cried. Not because I was weak, but because I was finally strong enough to walk away from something that no longer served me. I had loved deeply. I had lost painfully. And now I was learning to choose myself, not out of spite, but out of survival. There's a silence that settles in after goodbye. Not the silence you get when someone leaves a room, but the kind that follows you everywhere. It crawls into your car, slips beneath your pillow, drips from the coffee cup you forgot to finish. That's the silence I met the morning after I left Sarah. It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was just there. Heavy. Permanent. I sat in that borrowed guest room and stared out the window at a sky that looked the same as it always had, which felt like a betrayal in itself. How could the world still look normal, still spin forward, when everything I knew had just collapsed? No alarm clock, no good morning text, no sound of her brushing her hair in the bathroom or humming softly while making coffee. Just absence. Total, echoing absence. I checked my phone more times than I'll ever admit. Part of me hoping she'd reach out again, apologize again, beg again. But she didn't. And maybe that was a clearer sign that this wasn't just a fight. It was the ending. I wandered into the kitchen, poured myself coffee that tasted like ash, and scrolled through old photos on my phone. Our wedding, that vacation to the coast, her asleep on the couch, mouth slightly open, hair a mess. The photo I always swore captured her truest self. But now, even that felt distant. I wasn't looking at my wife anymore. I was looking at a woman I used to know. The silence wasn't just outside me. It had taken root inside me. No arguments. No explanations left to give. Just questions without answers. Would I ever trust again? Would I ever be able to hear the word love and not flinch? Would I ever look at someone and believe they meant forever when they said it? These thoughts weren't dramatic. They were survival. Because betrayal doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your sense of reality. It makes you question every moment you thought was safe. Every word you thought was honest. Every touch you believed was love. I picked up a pen that wasn't mine and opened a notebook that didn't belong to me, and I began to write, not because I had something poetic to say, but because I needed to bleed. In ink, I wrote everything I couldn't say to her face, everything I still carried that she never saw. I wrote that I missed a version of her who looked at me like I was enough. I wrote that I didn't hate her, but I hated what she did to the version of me that believed in her. And then I stopped writing, because what else was there to say? She had cried. She had confessed. And still, she had let me go. The silence after goodbye isn't empty. It's full of memories, of echoes, of ghosts she didn't invite. But eventually, silence becomes space, and space becomes peace. That day, I didn't feel peace yet, but for the first time, I felt distance. And distance was a start. There's something strange about waking up in a bed that isn't yours, but feeling more yourself than you have in months. No familiar ceiling. No warm body next to you. Just the quiet hum of traffic outside and the cold air touching your skin. And yet, for the first time in what felt like forever, I could finally breathe. Not fully, not freely, but without her. And that in itself was a kind of rebirth. It didn't come all at once. That peace, that stillness, that self, it came in fragments. In sips of hot coffee that didn't need to be shared. In the small relief of not having to wonder where she was, or who she was texting, or why she didn't come home smiling anymore. It came in moments where I stopped reaching for my phone, stopped rehearsing conversations I'd never have again, stopped picturing her with him. Dr. Raphael. The name I'll probably never forget. Not because of who he is, but because of what he represented. The fracture, the final blow, the truth I never asked for but somehow always felt. I started taking walks again. Long, aimless walks where I didn't care where I ended up. I passed people holding hands, laughing, living their lives untouched by the storm I had just come through. And instead of envy, I felt something different, a strange kind of gratitude, because I had survived. Not perfectly, not proudly, but honestly. You don't come out of betrayal whole. You come out reshaped, sharpened in some places, softer in others. And that reshaping hurts. But it also reveals. It reveals what you tolerated that you shouldn't have, what you gave away that you needed to keep, and what you deserve moving forward. I don't know if I'll fall in love again. I don't know if I'll ever hear, "I love you," without scanning it for cracks. But I do know this. I will never lose myself again in the process of loving someone else. I will never silence my instincts or ignore the small signs that something's wrong. Because love should never cost you your identity. Love should be an echo, not an erasure. A mirror, not a mask. One night, a few weeks after I left, I got a letter from her. Not a message, not a voicemail. A letter, handwritten, folded neatly, sealed with care. I read it once, maybe twice. She apologized again. She told me she was in therapy, that she understood what she had done, that she wished she had chosen differently, that she still loved me. But what stood out most was the sentence near the end. "If you ever decide to forgive me, I'll be here." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer I don't open anymore, because forgiveness isn't always about going back. Sometimes it's about setting yourself free, and I've already done that. I forgave her, quietly, while watching the sun rise over a new day. I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I did. I deserved peace. I deserved to stop bleeding from wounds I didn't cause. I deserved to breathe without her shadow in my lungs. And now I do, slowly, steadily, stronger every day. I'm not healed, but I'm healing. And maybe that's the most honest ending I can give this story. Not a fairy tale, not a revenge arc, just a man who was broken and chose not to stay broken. A man who now knows, even when love falls apart at 2 a.m., you can still wake up and rebuild. You've come this far. That means something. You felt this. You lived it. Maybe not this exact story, but your own version of it. So if you're still here, still breathing under the weight of something they'll never apologize for, hit subscribe. Because no one should walk through this kind of betrayal alone. And if no one else says it, I will. I'm glad you're still here.